Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Okay, obviously there is a ton going on. Just a couple notes before we start. I think we've all seen how consequential these interviews with Bob Woodward have been, and I want to thank the AC360 team and Anderson and Charlie and Jimmy Gengel for last night's terrific hour. I think we've all seen how consequential these town halls can be, and that's my way of reminding everybody that we have a town hall with Joe Biden tomorrow night at 8 p.m. And I want to make sure that we are pushing in every way towards that event. Again, we all see how consequential these can be. So we'll get to all of that and the politics of it all and the Washington of it all. But I do want to start with both the hurricane and COVID and ask Matthew to begin. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. So the water is rising fast on the Gulf Coast. This is obviously a long-running, slow-motion flood event playing out before our eyes. The wind conditions also more intense, I think, than we expected. Landfall was as a strong Category 2, and Dave has a quick tick-tock of the rest of the day on this.
Yeah, the eye is just inland right now. It continues to crawl, though, only 3 miles per hour. And what that means is we're going to continue to see these hurricane-force winds, the storm surge battering the coast for much of the day. Pensacola, for instance, will be in hurricane-force winds through probably early afternoon and won't get into tropical storm-force winds until probably after 6 o'clock tonight, just to give you an idea for how long this is going to last along the coast. We've already seen a couple of feet of rain in Pensacola. Some areas could pick up as much as 35 inches of rain. There are already flash flood emergencies in effect, and the storm will be with us for days. It's going to move into Alabama and Georgia, could produce flooding all the way into Virginia.
And more than 500,000 power outages, including nearly all of the county where Mobile sits. Florida activating the National Guard, the expectation of search and rescue operations in the water. Gary Tuckman up right now in Pensacola Beach, up through late morning, down for a bit, back for late afternoon in Prime. Ed Lavandera in Mobile coming up just now through the rest of the day. Polo Sandoval coming back up later. The desk can just advise shows on exactly who's up which hour, and I can stop there or go to COVID.
Does anybody have any questions or thoughts on the hurricane? Okay, then let's go to COVID.
Okay, so we've just seen the biggest day for new cases and death reports in a month as the U.S. closes in on this terrible milestone of 200,000 lost Americans. Yesterday's totals, over 52,000 cases, over 1,400 deaths, the largest number since August 12th. Yes, Tuesdays tend to be larger numbers, but this was big even for a recent Tuesday. A lot more red on the CNN map this morning. Almost half of the states on average, week to week, up in new cases, almost 2/3 of them up week to week in new death reports. Again, the averages tell the story, even with all the fluctuations. We are averaging 40,000 new cases a day in America. CNN has new exclusive reporting coming later today on the illness that halted that big clinical vaccine trial, internal documents from AstraZeneca that do in fact point to a specific paralyzing condition in an otherwise healthy woman. More on that in a moment. And task force members face questions on the Hill today about the response. The morning after, Trump falters in trying to explain his handling to voters and denies his own words on the downplaying and talks about a herd mentality strategy. Of course, all of the sideshow as well, with Michael Caputo apologizing for attacking the scientists considering leave. Let me focus on vaccines for a second. First, we are checking on this AP report that the White House is coming out with a new proposal for a gradual rollout of free vaccines, 2 doses. More to come on that. There's an HHS call underway right now, and we are asking. And then as we head into the final weeks, likely, of the big clinical trials, lingering worries about safety, and future supply. Elizabeth Cohen has new reporting releasing on the lead today, internal AstraZeneca incident report citing a diagnosis of, quote, confirmed transverse myelitis, despite the company's denial that there was any diagnosis. A healthy woman in her 30s who suddenly had trouble walking and had pain and weakness after receiving her second dose in the trial. Lots of questions about transparency since the company only revealed that it had a second incident on the second incident that there was a first. Fauci saying it was just a matter of time before AstraZeneca's trial resumes in the U.S. And in the wake of the reporting that the highest levels of the NIH are worried about this, the director of the NIH speaks at 2 o'clock to the national academies for an event on public trust and vaccines. Also, this note from the World Economic Forum of the strong possibility that there is not enough global vaccine manufacturing capacity. Turning to testing, our data tool still shows the total amount of new testing has declined over the past month. Furthermore, a CNN investigation reveals that what should have been a turning point on this has turned into a missed opportunity. If you remember the big White House announcement of buying 150 million of those new Abbott Labs rapid antigen tests a few weeks ago. They're at the point of care. They don't need to go to a lab. They can go to schools and workplaces. But it turns out that the rollout is not what it was cracked up to be due to a lack of a coordinated national testing plan. So 10 states have banded together to order their own tests, and private organizations are giving them guidance. And we have Drew Griffin with a piece on this for Sit Room and for 360. Couple of key numbers. 23 states are up, 17 steady, 10 down in new cases this week. Many states in the Midwest and the Mid-South and the West seeing more than 20% increases over last week, with the highest ones in Alabama, Wisconsin, and Nebraska. And just flagging this continuing story we've been tracking and publishing on out of Maine, it's now 176 cases and now 7 deaths from infections linked to a wedding. The deaths were people not at the wedding, but infected by someone who was, people mostly at a nursing home. We've got Nick Valencia in Atlanta, Rosa Flores in Miami on the various lines here today. And then on schools, we just learned that Broward County is recommending an in-person reopening in just over 2 weeks. You remember Miami-Dade and Broward just moved to phase 2, which enables this. New York City is days away from some in-person, but it turns out 40% of the students have requested the entirely online option, and the struggle goes on in colleges. UGA suspending a fraternity over a gathering, Missouri expelling several students, Arizona telling students to shelter in place. We've got Biana and Evan on education today. Just a couple of other notes here from health. At 10 o'clock is the Senate Appropriations hearing on the review of the response. Redfield and Giroir will be there. Sanjay moderates a noon Congressional Hispanic Caucus event, which will involve interviewing Fauci at the event, so we'll watch for that. And then just 2 items as we continue to talk about the racial disparities when it comes to COVID. First, new reporting from Epic Health and Kaiser that racism and discrimination are factors that play a role in larger numbers of minority deaths and hospitalizations, not just the underlying health conditions, but disproportionate delays in treatment and in testing. And our story up on digital of this new CDC study that finds that coronavirus rarely kills children, but when it does, minorities are at much higher risk. We've got the wrap pieces today. Erica Hill for 4, 6, and 8, and Nick Watt for 5, 7, and 9. And with that, I will pause.
Okay, great. Thank you, Matthew. There's a lot there. Let's first move to Washington and cover the Washington angle of COVID and the Trump angle of COVID and deal with that first. Washington?
Okay. So in the wake of what Matthew just described as these numbers continuing to be larger than they have for a long time, the president continued again to downplay this for this 90-minute town hall. Nothing more could have been done on COVID. Indeed, he upplayed it. This obviously in contradiction to exactly what he told Woodward, that of course he downplayed it, and then he went ahead and downplayed it again, saying that the U.S. is rounding the corner. There were tough questions on this virus. He said a lot of people think that masks are not good. He used the example of waiters and then blamed Biden for not having a mask policy, to which Biden replied, he's not the president. He continued to claim that it will go away, claiming herd mentality, which he clearly confused with herd immunity, again, in contradiction to the doctors. He continued on this. He has a health care plan. And as we've reported over and over, there is absolutely no sign of any healthcare plan anywhere around. And I just, the Daniel Dale wrap of it all was just incredible, as it always is, with all of the falsehoods that he said. In terms of Caputo, Matthew mentioned that we're clearing this on Facebook video as we speak. We're working on reporting now, mostly from Nick Valencia coming out of the CDC, and how all these shenanigans started once Caputo got there, and so hopefully we'll have more on that. And this comes as he apologized to these HHS staffers. The other thing that clearly is becoming an issue is the stimulus package. Pelosi saying yesterday she'd keep the House in. Trump saying last night that he would engage in it. We have not only the stimulus package, but also a reminder that all the money for elections is stuck in this bill. So how this plays out and the pressure that Pelosi's getting from Democrats to do something is very real. So we'll see where that is. At 12:30, Trump meets with Jewish leaders, and then he has a fundraiser at 7 tonight. That's what I got uncovered.
Okay. Yep, thanks. So let's open it up for a conversation here about COVID and Trump in the town hall and anything that people want to talk about. I would just offer that I think on the town hall, I think what we saw was the difficulty of Trump not having any experience in the last 3.5 years of outside the Fox bubble. And some of those questioners were quite pointed. I know a few of them will continue to be on CNN today. But I think that that's worth noting, especially with the debate less than 2 weeks away now, and Trump being challenged. I think that's worth noting. I do think that the Caputo video that we're going to clear is absolutely worth looking at. I know we've done the story, but now we have the video. Anybody else?
Yeah, Jeff, the Caputo video, I was watching it online a few minutes ago. The stuff he says about doctors is just so unbelievable and disgusting and disparaging about CDC staff. Like, it's unbelievable that he's still going into that building. I mean, it's really, really out there.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I think that we should be focused on that today as well. Anyone else?
Yeah, maybe it's for political, but we got 2 weeks till the debate, and I guess we'll be talking about this a lot. But watching the town hall meeting, it'll be interesting to see. It's just Chris Wallace and Biden and Trump. But once he gets a question and he starts answering with all those falsehoods, what happens? I mean, we've never had a candidate who confidently takes a question and just says multiple things that aren't true. I guess it's just left up to the voters, but tens of millions will be watching somebody who just continues to say things that aren't true in a confident way. And you're watching it last night, even with regular questioners, and he just bulldozes his way through it. It's just kind of a remarkable scene. it's not that much different than the White House press briefing, but in some ways, it just seemed different because he takes a question from somebody and just goes in his normal way of not answering, but then also adding all these things that aren't true. I guess we have plenty of time to talk about it, but last night I just thought that it makes you think, how's the debate really going to be able to parse out what's fact and what's not? Maybe that's left up to his opponent.
Yeah, Frank Fahrenkopf said that on Brian's show, that it is not up to the moderators to correct him. It is up to the candidate.
Well, I think, listen, we're gonna have time in the next 2 weeks to get to that. I think we should worry about that as we get closer to the debate. I do think, back to Matthew's point, I think it's important to note that, yesterday was the highest number of new cases of coronavirus in the U.S. in a month, on the same day that Trump said that the virus will go away. And I do think that those two things are worth juxtaposing. Anyone else? And I would just add what I said at the beginning, which is that I think that the audio tapes that Anderson rolled out last night of Trump, in his own words, were just an incredible window into Trump and the psyche of Trump, and just fascinating stuff. Okay, Matthew, why don't you take us through the rest of domestic, please?
Sure. A few other things. First, the Western wildfires, nearly 90 of them burning in 11 states. Just unbearable air quality across a large area. At least 16 people still missing in Oregon. And we've talked a lot about the role of misinformation and bad information, and now the suggestion that bad information may be costing lives. Up on digital, the story of the Oregon couple who reportedly had planned to evacuate, then stopped after getting bad info that the nearby fire was mostly contained. In the Southern California Bobcat fire, the containment level has dropped, which of course is bad news. Crews struggling to defend this well-known Mount Wilson Observatory near LA. We're also starting to look into the COVID risk concerns on the West Coast. Of course, people being told to stay indoors. That's for the people who actually have places to stay, others clustered in shelters and parking lots, etc. So more to come on this. We've got Dan Simon near the Berry Creek fire in Central California. Stephanie Elam and Kyung La in Southern California near the Bobcat fire, Martin Savage in Oregon. We're keeping an eye on the manhunt in the ambush of the LA County deputies, the reward up to $275,000. After that giant settlement in the Breonna Taylor case in Louisville civilly, we're awaiting word on the next Breonna Taylor case news, any decision on charges involving the officers from the Attorney General and grand jury in Louisville. Guidance only, not for reporting, is that the AG is presenting the case to a grand jury today. And then finally, the New York Bureau and the policing beat are working through the documents from the Daniel Prude case in Rochester that suggest police there tried for months to hide the body camera footage from the public. And I think that's it.
Great. Thank you. Does anybody have any thoughts on domestic? International.
International, main COVID lines, big picture, it could be 2 years before the world starts thinking of a pre-COVID lifestyle. That's from the Chief Science Officer of the World Health Organization. She says they're looking at 2022 at least, but as the timeline for enough people, and that is 60 to 70% of the population, start getting a vaccine to build immunity. She also added that health officials are still trying to just control the virus at this point as opposed to eliminating it. That said, very few signs of the virus being under control around the world, much of the same picture in the US with cases going up. And the story is now health systems once again coming under pressure. I'll start in India, has now more than 5 million cases, the last million coming in just the last 11 days. It's now second to just the US in confirmed cases. Russia says it's going to supply 100 million doses of its Sputnik V vaccine to an Indian pharmaceutical company, possibly before the end of the year, once successful trials are complete.
and the regulatory approval is given in India. So Vedika Sud has been pulling all those strands together for us. In France, as I mentioned yesterday, Melissa got great access to an ICU unit in Bordeaux. Cases in France rising, health system under pressure, ICUs and hotspots like Bordeaux reaching capacity. The key takeaways from the head of the ICU she went to: young people are driving the second wave, they're infecting their older relatives. The second wave will be less dramatic, as in less people arriving in hospitals at the same time, but it will be much more prolonged. And it's all about dealing with a virus that is here to stay. There were the headlines from Melissa's piece, and she's filed whips as well. China, interesting story from China today. The state-owned pharma company Sinopharm says that hundreds of thousands of people have now received COVID vaccines under the country's emergency use program. This includes workers, diplomats, not just medical workers, but people working on the Belt and Road sort of construction initiatives too. They claim not a single case of negative side effects or of anyone being affected after getting the vaccine. And they say that they'll have 100 million doses of their two vaccines now in phase 3 trials, possibly by the end of the year. An expert at China's version of the CDC is also saying that if the trials go well, the Chinese public could start taking their vaccines in November and December. So Stephen Jiang is on all that. Obviously, big pinch of salt, skepticism around, what are the facts and figures on these hundreds of thousands, and there's plenty more for us to be digging into in the next few days on those claims. And then finally on COVID, in the UK, Boris Johnson is under fire for the country's, utter sort of testing fiasco on the COVID front as the scale of the chaos becomes more apparent. There are now reports of testing centres completely empty, but automated booking systems telling people that no tests are available, and the IT system that underpins the whole structure says that you have a better chance of getting a test where you live if you log on and pretend you live hundreds of miles away. The government promises to do whatever it can to boost labour capacity. He came under a lot of fire at Prime Minister's question time today, the irony being that the leader of the opposition wasn't able to be there because he's at home waiting a test, which he has been waiting days for and he can't get. So Scott McLean is covering that. He's up live for us, and he's also filed some whips. I can go on to other news, Jeff, very quickly, or pause there.
Yeah, no. Let's go ahead and finish international.
Okay, just finishing up international. Oren Lieberman has been up overnight covering the rocket attacks from Gaza into Israel. 8 of the 13 rockets being intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome defense. The attacks were in response to the signing agreement at the White House yesterday. Oren has filed whips on that. We're also continuing to look at this ongoing tension between the Greeks and Turks. This time it's spilled over into the migrant crisis, with the Turks accusing their neighbours of the forced expulsion of thousands of migrants. They claim that thousands of asylum seekers have been rounded up and abandoned at sea. Jumana Karadesh has a view from a Turkish Coast Guard vessel, and Nick Robertson from Athens as the Greek side. Not surprisingly, strong denials and a vow to continue guarding their borders under international law. Japan has a new Prime Minister, Yoshihide Suga, a former cardboard factory worker and a farmer's son. Will Ripley's done a profile on who the new leader of the world's third largest economy is, and he's been live for us around that. And then very lastly, just a kind of a fun piece from Mexico. Matt Rivers has been looking at this, the saga of the country's presidential plane. President Obrador's vowed to get rid of this 787 that he inherited. He first tried to sell it, then he tried to raffle it off, and it's become a long-running national joke. He promised 100 winners of the raffle $1 million each instead of actually getting a plane, and with all the remaining money going to public hospitals to support the COVID relief. Problem is, all the remaining money amounts to just $5,000 per hospital. So as well as trying to get rid of his plane, his fundraising efforts for COVID have completely flopped too. So Matt Rivers has done a nice sort of piece on how this has been going on for now 6 months. And that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Business.
Jeff, good morning. Equities higher this morning, driven by the momentum on that Eli Lilly news that Matthew had mentioned. But new data out in the last hour showing that Americans are still buying goods, but at a slower pace. We got retail sales in August, missing estimates. Still the fourth straight month of increase, but obviously coming in at a slower pace. As we know, government stimulus meant to offset the pandemic economic damage, helped retail spending, and one of those programs, the $600 week enhanced unemployment benefits, expired in July. Christine Romans and Allison Cossack are up on that. But this morning's retail sales will likely put more pressure on Congress to pass those stimulus measures that Virginia mentioned. The state of the U.S. consumer and retail sales certainly going to weigh on the Fed this afternoon as they meet at 2 o'clock for an interest rate decision. Jerome Powell, this is going to be their last meeting before the election, and Powell likely to continue to urge Congress to find a way to get new fiscal stimulus measures as soon as possible. But that obviously does not appear to be happening. Christina Alessi is up and available on that today. Now, these warnings from the Fed seem to fall on deaf ears from the president during last night's ABC town hall. The president disputed the growing concern regarding the economy and continuing to say that the recession is in a V shape. Millions of Americans, though, are out of work. Temporary job losses turning permanent, and the coronavirus clearly still not under control. But the president is telling Americans, don't worry, your stocks are doing great. Fact is, only about half of Americans have stock investments, most of them in retirement accounts, and only 14% of those actually own individual stocks. The president also continued to hammer Biden, saying that he will raise their taxes and bring back regulation, but sources telling Christina Alessi most CEOs and businesses on Wall Street still continuing to quietly support Trump's economic policies. Christine Romans has been up on that this morning, and Christina Alessi is available throughout the afternoon. And that is where we begin on COVID. I could stop there or go on to a few other threads.
No, let's go ahead and finish business, please.
Got it. Yep, got it. So late yesterday, Twitter and Facebook shut down accounts on their platforms reportedly linked to misleading social media campaign run by this Turning Points Action. It's an offshoot of the popular conservative youth activist organization Turning Points USA. And of course, new this morning, Trump sharing a manipulated video of Biden on Twitter, replacing the song Despacito with NWA's anti-police anthem. Twitter came out quickly and labeled it as manipulated media. Joni O'Sullivan is available on all of those threads, and that's where we begin.
Okay. Anything else in Washington?
Hey,
Yeah.
Jeff, just before Virginia goes, can I just one thing on the Twitter thing? So,
yeah, of course.
So this is obviously just outrageous stuff, right? The President of the United States is doing this. We talked about it yesterday with the pedophile thing. One of the things about this is it's like a defense attorney in a trial who introduces something in the courtroom all of a sudden that they know is it admissible and it's an objection, et cetera, but the jury hears it, right? So when the president puts this out on his Twitter feed to 70 million plus people, you know, it's viewed by millions of people, many of whom believe that it's real, some of whom obviously think it's some kind of joke and think it's funny, and others who just dismiss it. And Twitter throws up this little label, as is noted in, as Richard noted, they throw up this little label on it that says manipulated video, but it's just, you know, it's insane that the president of the United States is doing this. And 2 days in a row now, one, Joe Biden's a pedophile, and two, Joe Biden is dancing and laughing to, you know, F the police. And it's just, you know, I mean, again, we have an issue because the more we show it or talk about it, we're actually giving it some air, but I don't think we can avoid coming after this and calling it out about how just absolutely outrageous it is. And Twitter, by just throwing up this little tiny manipulated video thing underneath it, is not really doing anything to stop it.
So I think Michael is like 1,000% right. And I think it's got to be called out. And frankly, I think there's two parties that have to be called out here. I think it's Trump for what he's doing, and I think it's Twitter for not you know, dealing with it. Manipulated video doesn't do the job. And you know, Joni O'Sullivan has been saying this for a long time, and I agree with Michael, and I think we shouldn't ignore this. I agree.
I mean, I think it seems to be the question that Twitter has to answer is, if you label it manipulated, why is a manipulated video allowed to be retweeted by anyone?
No, look, it's honestly Twitter, and by the way, and Twitter's better than, frankly, the other social media platforms, and they're still not handling this right. So, and the only mistake Michael made was I think he said it was like 75 million. I think it's like 89 million Twitter followers. So it's like even worse. Ridiculous.
So, this is David. I would just say to not fall into the trap Michael identified. I do think the Twitter angle is the bigger angle of the story because Trump will leak or put stuff out there whenever he can. And the fact that Twitter insists on taking a passive approach is what allows this to persist.
Yeah, I agree.
I think the question is, why does Donald Trump still have an active Twitter account? Tons of people's accounts have been shut down for so much less. And it just seems like he's playing by very different rules according to their own rules.
Because, so Rebecca, that's a totally fair question, but I think it's a little rhetorical, and you know the answer, because if Twitter goes to war with taking Donald Trump down, you know, probably the end of Twitter. So it's a good point, but, you know, I think we know the reason.
But we should make them answer that publicly and point that out. They should be held accountable for giving him a pass.
Totally fair. Totally fair. Look, John, I think, you know, Eric and Brianna, I think we should address this today if we can. Okay, let's move on to Washington, please.
Yeah, and while we're having this whole conversation, Ana Cabrera has just sent us what's going on in southern Florida with these conspiracy theories being run in Spanish-speaking South Florida ahead of election day. So this is going on everywhere. So we're going to look into that too. While we, just to mention Trump and race from last night, he was asked by a voter if he realized how tone deaf his rhetoric was. He took a pass on that answer, saying he hopes that there's not a race problem, certainly not with me. And then two other things on voting. Last night, Barr gave one of his most out there claims about, you know, that this is BS, that Trump wants to stay in office. He's never heard of that crap. And just very strident in his language. This obviously as the increasingly politicization of that department, and that's the role that they're going to play as we go into Election Day. And then finally, I just want to mention the Boeing report. This new report from the House provides new details bashing the FAA, bashing Boeing, about just how all the mistakes that led up to those two crashes. And Piedmontines on that.
Okay, does anybody have anything before we move to politics? Okay, just before we move to politics, I would say I think you know, there were obviously a lot of really important moments out of that town hall last night with Trump, but you know, the fact that he once again lied about having a health care plan and you know, straight to that woman's face about health care and pre-existing conditions. That's what Obamacare covered. And they are in the Supreme Court now trying to kill that. And he says he has a plan, just as he says he's had a plan for the last 3.5 years. There's no plan. Otherwise, they would have released it. And I think we've got to continue to hold their feet to the fire on that, too. I know there's a 1 p.m. White House briefing. I think that we should be pushing on that. And I think we should be covering this today because, you know, they're in the Supreme Court trying to kill this, and they're promising a plan, and there is no plan.
Jeff, don't
Politics.
you think same thing on immigration? He said there was a plan coming like in days after 3.5 years when he got that great question from the person in the audience regarding immigration, and he said it's coming. So that's another one. If we get surrogates on, where's the immigration plan?
Okay. I think healthcare, you know, listen, they're both important. Politics.
Just on your point about the pre-existing conditions, it's also, you can see in competitive Senate races across the country becoming yet again a problem for Republican candidates who are scrambling to twist their records into pretzels about how they are supportive of pre-existing conditions, except that they voted to dismantle Obamacare where the pre-existing conditions coverage was enshrined. So we see it.
This is why I think the healthcare issue is the bigger issue, frankly. But anyway, go ahead.
And so we see it down ballot as well, and we see it this week if you saw Sarah Muha's reporting this morning that the Biden team has $65 million worth of advertising on the air this week, their most robust advertising week to date this campaign. And unlike the stuff we have seen this early in a general election in previous campaigns, and the focus of that in the ads that they rolled out as a part of that $65 million advertising blitz this week is exactly this: healthcare and pre-existing conditions. So that is where they're sort of putting their money this week, is exactly on that message as well. So that can all feed into that story around Trump in the town hall yesterday that you're talking about, Jeff. As for Biden himself, he'll put the focus back on COVID today, which is exactly where his campaign likes it to be. He will be in Wilmington, Delaware, getting a briefing from health officials, and then at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, he will go out and talk about a vaccine. This will be very vaccine-focused, about how to equitably and effectively and safely distribute the vaccine. I guess we should now be on alert for later after that for Trump questioning why Biden hasn't already equitably distributed the vaccine. But this will be his big focus today, and Jessica Dean is up there in Wilmington for us. I do want to just note that also with a healthcare focus, actually, Jill Biden and Doug Emhoff, the spouses of the Democratic running mates, will be campaigning together today in New Hampshire, and they will be focusing on healthcare. We will see the two of them together for the first time on the trail in a battleground state. So just wanted to note that. You also saw, more polls coming out of these critical upper Midwest battleground states, these states and the very states that delivered the Oval Office to Donald Trump, where each one of these polls sort of telling the same story about Biden having an advantage there, and that is a critical, just a critical component to both, Donald Trump or Joe Biden's path to 270. And I think those are our highlights at the moment.
Okay. Anybody on thoughts on politics? Okay. Digital.
Hey, 29.7 million uniques yesterday. The number one story was the Breonna Taylor settlement. And also Ron Bronstein's analysis. Those two were top overall for uniques and also engagement time. But really, the Breonna Taylor was the number one runaway. Collinson this morning is number one at 28,000 concurrents and still growing. He's going to hit 30,000 soon. Trump fumbles during tough encounter with undecided voters. This also has the top engagement time of anything currently on the site. The voter to president, let me finish, sir. That's the headline on the number two story, which is just a standalone video clip of the key moments from last night. It's from Don's show and it has Don's framing and analysis around it. It's really rare to see a standalone video in the top five like that. People are coming to us to find out what they need to know or revisit or learn from what happened last night at the town hall. And, Stelter reached out last night to some of the questioners immediately afterwards, heard back from three of them. So we have that as a standalone piece. It was also in the Reliable newsletter. And then the 20 false claims from the town hall is publishing shortly. So we're going to continue to pull threads on this. There's a third story in the top five this morning from last night, and it's an op-ed from Scott Jennings. Just simple, Trump's town hall did not go well. Sally making landfall and the DLE pulling in all the moments and updates that Dave mentioned is in the top five. And we also put up the light site That's our stripped down site for people in the path of the hurricane or with low connectivity and battery. So that's a good service that we have out there. And then lastly, in the top 5, the story on the virus, the story of the Maine wedding linked to the deaths of 7 people who didn't even attend it. Right outside, I should note from our discussion yesterday and this morning is the headline, "The Faceless Trump Retweet That Reflects a New Campaign Low." So to Michael's point, we're not calling out, we're not repeating the falsehood, to put it lightly, in the headline, but we're saying that what happened was wrong and ridiculous and holding to account, and we'll continue to do that with the Twitter story and the new post this morning. On fires and climate, in addition to all the latest developments that Matthew mentioned, we have a good lineup of head-turning stories. How the smoke just hangs all day in Los Angeles, how unbearable it is to live with that air quality every moment of the day and every breath you take. It seeps into everything. So it's kind of a personal human story on dealing with this, rich in color. LA, San Francisco, Portland, Seattle now all have the worst air quality in the world. Smoke from the West Coast fires have now reached Europe. A couple other climate stories. In 2010, 196 countries put together a plan to save the Earth's ecosystems from man-made destruction. So here we are in 2020, and not a single target has been met. There were 10 targets, not a single one has been met. This is the UN Global Biodiversity Report. We've got that story. It's a really good one. The glaciers in Glacier National Park have shrunk up to 80% of their size since 1966. And then we have an explainer on the difference between climate and weather from Brandon and Justin, again, off of the conversation we had here yesterday. On COVID, we're all in for Cohen's exclusive reporting on the latest on AstraZeneca. Melissa Bell in Bordeaux, as Mike said, that is just terrific work. We've got that up. And the North Carolina couple who died minutes apart holding hands. Those are some of the COVID stories, in addition to the DOE and all the updates and all the latest numbers. On race and policing, you know, that Breonna Taylor settlement story that was so huge yesterday, our follow this morning is looking at that compared to other payouts linked to police shootings. This was certainly one of the largest, and Nicole Chavez looked at the recent history of those settlements. In business, here is why some state economies are recovering faster than others. This is Annalyn Kurtz using our Back to Normal Index that we just launched to look at why certain states like Maine and Nebraska and Rhode Island are at the top of the ranking. And then a little buzzy story, the flip side of the tags inside of your clothing from Patagonia now say, vote the assholes out. Speaking of buzzy stories, International has a bunch of headlines like the strange story of Mexico's presidential plane lottery from Matt Rivers. Barbados wants to just drop the queen. They're going to do it. And a 13-year-old boy was sentenced to 10 years in prison for blasphemy in Nigeria. So good international rundown too. And then lastly, we have launched CNN.com/election101. Check it out. You can find all of our explainers like the Electoral College Explain, what you need to know about mail-in voting, election deadlines and dates, our polling, our fact checks. It's all there in text and video and audio. And speaking of audio, we launched a brand new podcast with the same name, Election 101. The first episode today is on voter registration. That's it.
Thank you very much. John.
Good morning, Jeff. So Hurricane Sally, obviously in the top spot throughout the day, hitting our reporters both in Pensacola and Mobile, Weather Center, and we do have bookings with mayors and officials along all those coastal cities and towns in Alabama and the western part of Florida's panhandle around Pensacola. Coronavirus, Elizabeth Cohen on the spiking cases, biggest number we've seen in a month. Are we going to see more of that in the coming days? Two big events that we are watching today could yield some decent news. 10 a.m., there's a hearing in front of a Senate committee with CDC Chief Redfield and Admiral Garrar. And then at noon, Sanjay is moderating a panel for the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, an event they're putting on. Fauci is one of the panelists, a number of other medical professionals and some representatives from Big Pharma. Like I said, that's during the noon hour, so we'll watch to see what news is made there and look to get Sanjay up on the back end of that. We also have Doctors Larry Brilliant and Carlos Del Rio on all of that. We just reported the Big Ten headline. They are reversing the decision to play football. We'll keep that in the mix. And then, of course, there's the huge political piece. John Harwood and Caitlin Collins from the White House, all the tough questions that Trump faced at the town hall yesterday, COVID and otherwise. We do have two key bookings, people who did question him. Paul Tubiana of Bethlehem. He's the first questioner, the guy who supported Trump in 2016, who then says to Trump, "Why did you throw vulnerable people like me under the bus?" He'll be on later on today with Brianna. He's already getting threats because of his questioning. And then the woman who made all the news, the professor who asked Trump about where's his health care plan and what will be done to protect people with pre-existing conditions like her. She will also be on with Brianna. We'll let those two interviews breathe, but they should be compelling interviews. Nia Malika Henderson and Josh Dawsey wrapping up all the Trump threads, including the questions he got on race. We're looking at that Caputo video on once that's cleared, and Brianna is going to build out a segment on Trump and Twitter. Jessica Dean is in Wilmington for the Biden speech, where he's going to lay out his COVID vaccine plan at 2:30. We will take that and build it afterwards. And another booking to flag with John King, the editor-in-chief of Scientific American. They have never, in their 175-year history, endorsed anybody for president. They are this year. They're endorsing Biden, citing Trump's continuing war against science as the reasoning for supporting Biden the upcoming election. Besides COVID and the storms, the other news that we will touch on today, Pete Montine on that damning Russian report going after Boeing and the FAA, all the failures involving the MAX. Stephanie Elam in California and Martin Savage in Oregon on the western wildfires. There could be another House hearing that could yield some news. They're looking into the firing of the State Department Inspector General. That's next hour. We'll get Kylie Atwood up around that once we see what news is made. And Champions for Change at 1 o'clock today.
Thank you, John. Washington.
Good morning. At 4 o'clock, we'll pick up in politics. We've got Caitlin Collins on Trump, the town hall, healthcare, all the COVID threads, and Jessica on the Biden speech. Congressman Max Rose joins as well to react to Trump, and he's also talked to Pelosi. He's pissed about the lack of a stimulus deal. Erica Hill has our COVID wrap, and we'll have Sanjay on the spiking cases and deaths, and then Elizabeth Cohen packages her reporting on AstraZeneca, and Dr. Shisha Jha breaks that down for us. And in terms of natural disasters, of course, we'll stay on fires. Governor Inslee joins us today about Washington and the West Coast. And, of course, throughout the hurricane, we'll have live shots and beepers. We'll have a better sense as we get closer.
And in the Situation Room, we'll be on top of all the latest developments with Hurricane Sally, hitting our reporters in the field, the Weather Center, local officials at the center of the storm. On COVID, we'll dig into and fact-check all the various falsehoods and lies the president spread last night on the same day the country saw the highest number of new cases in a month. We'll also be following the latest on the vaccine front, including Elizabeth Cohen's reporting coming out of 4. And we will also continue pushing on Trump's non-existent phantom health care plan, as well as the latest on the Caputo story. We'll keep an eye on the White House briefing at 1, see what comes out of that. We do have the Drew Griffin piece that Matthew mentioned on the antigen testing, how the government fumbled what should have been a turning point. And we will continue to push ahead to promote tomorrow's town hall with Joe Biden. And that's where we start.
Right. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Anybody else have anything they want to bring up? Where is that health care plan? Let's not drop that. Joe Biden town hall tomorrow night, 8 p.m. CNN. Make sure we're pushing to that. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.